They were told they couldn't fight, that the machinery was too complex, the pressure too great. That combat required something they simply didn't possess. November 7th, 1944, northeastern France. A German officer lowers his binoculars. His hands are shaking, not from fear, from disbelief. What he's watching through the smoke and chaos shouldn't be possible. Black American tankers, maneuvering 30-ton Shermans with precision that rivals his best crews, breaking through defensive positions that held for weeks. He reaches for his field journal. The pencil moves slowly across the page. These Negro tankers fight with precision we did not expect. Their coordination exceeds many German units I have witnessed. He pauses, then adds the words that feel like heresy. Either our intelligence has failed us completely, or we have been deliberately misled. For 3 years, Nazi propaganda had promised the Wehrmacht one thing: that African soldiers were primitives, incapable of modern warfare, unable to master complex machines, that when Germany's finest troops encountered them, it would be a slaughter. The officer watching through his binoculars knows the truth now, knows it in his gut, in the smoking wreckage of German positions, in the faces of prisoners being marched past. They were wrong about everything. 712 men are about to shatter an ideology, not with speeches or pamphlets, but with something far more devastating: pure, undeniable excellence. The journey to this moment began 2.5 years earlier. April 1st, 1942, Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. The formation of the 761st Tank Battalion was an experiment the United States Army didn't actually believe in. American military doctrine in 1942 was simple and brutal. Black soldiers couldn't fight. Decades of institutional racism had relegated African Americans to cooking, cleaning, hauling supplies. Anything except combat. The creation of the 761st was a political concession, a way to silence black newspapers and civil rights groups demanding their chance to serve. Nobody in the War Department expected it to work. Among the men reporting to Camp Claiborne was Reuben Rivers, 23 years old, from Tecumseh, Oklahoma. Half Cherokee, half black. Farm kid who worked the railways before his draft notice arrived. His service file would note something unusual: mechanical aptitude, natural leadership. But nobody was paying attention to aptitude. They were too busy measuring skull sizes and citing junk science about racial inferiority. Leonard Smith came from New York, William McBurney from Pennsylvania, Preston McNeil from Texas. Every corner of Black America represented, brought together by war, separated even in service by the color of their skin. Their commanding officer was different. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Bates, white, West Point educated, and convinced that everything the Army believed about race was wrong, Bates understood something the military hierarchy refused to accept. Given proper training and equipment, these men would prove equal to anyone. His challenge wasn't defeating the enemy. It was defeating his own military's prejudice. So Bates did something radical. He trained them harder than any white unit. Longer hours, higher standards, brutal expectations, because he understood the math. Every mistake would be cited as proof of racial inferiority. Every failure would confirm the doubters. The pressure was crushing, but it forged something stronger than steel. Louisiana summer. Inside the M5 Stuart light tank, temperatures hit 120 degrees, metal hot enough to burn skin through gloves. The crews practiced until coordination became instinct. Driver, gunner, loader, commander. 5 men becoming one organism. Tank commander gives an order. Gunner executes without thought. Loader feeds shells without pause. Driver maneuvers through hell without hesitation. They learned gunnery, how to hit targets at range while the vehicle's bouncing over rough terrain. How to identify friend from foe in split seconds. How to kill efficiently. They learned maintenance, how to replace tracks in the field, service engines under fire, keep the machines running when parts are scarce and time is shorter. They learned radio procedure, the precise language that coordinates armor across a battlefield. Clear communication that means the difference between victory and massacre. By August 1942, when they moved to Camp Livingston for large-scale maneuvers, their proficiency ratings matched veteran white armored units. Observers were shocked. Their discipline was flawless, mechanical skills exceptional, tactical awareness impressive. In mock battles, they dominated. Their maintenance records were perfect, gunnery scores high. By every objective measure, they were ready for war, but excellence bought them nothing. While white tank battalions shipped to North Africa, Italy, France, the 761st remained stateside, training, waiting, watching the war happen without them. The official reasons changed weekly. Not enough black support personnel. White infantry won't accept black tank support. The experiment needs more observation. The real reason was simpler, crueler. The army didn't believe black soldiers could fight. This belief, rooted in nothing but prejudice, kept the 761st in training while the world burned. Month after month, they trained. April 1943, they participated in Third Army maneuvers at Camp Polk. Large-scale exercises involving thousands of troops, combat simulations across hundreds of square miles. Again, they performed brilliantly. Again, no deployment orders arrived. The frustration was corrosive. These were men who'd volunteered or been drafted to fight fascism, confined to an endless training cycle because of their skin. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They were preparing to fight Nazi racial ideology while experiencing American racial prejudice. The paradox deepened at Fort Hood, Texas, September 1943. The 761st was upgraded to M4 Sherman medium tanks. The real deal, 30 tons of steel, 75mm main gun, later upgraded to 76mm, the firepower to engage German armor effectively. The Sherman was the workhorse of American armored forces. Complex, powerful, demanding. The men threw themselves into mastering it, learning its wider turning radius, greater fuel consumption, sophisticated fire control systems. They became proficient fast. Their enthusiasm for finally receiving combat-capable equipment showed in every training report. But Fort Hood sat in the heart of Jim Crow, Texas. Off-duty, black soldiers faced segregated everything. Separate bathrooms, water fountains, waiting rooms, restaurants that refused to serve them, businesses that turned them away, police that harassed them, civilians who treated them with open contempt. On base, conditions were marginally better. Black and white soldiers trained separately, separately, slept in separate barracks. Even the post-exchange and movie theater were segregated. Black soldiers wearing the uniform of the United States Army were denied basic human dignity because of their skin. One incident crystallized the contradiction. Segundi, Lieutenant Jack Roosevelt Robinson, exceptional athlete, future baseball legend, refused to move to the back of a base bus in July 1944. His battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Bates, supported him. Senior officers intervened anyway, transferred Robinson, court-martialed him. Robinson was eventually acquitted, but too late to deploy with the 761st. The message was clear. Black soldiers, no matter how capable, would be treated as second-class citizens. Then, finally, June 1944. The deployment order arrived after 2.5 years of training. The 761st was alerted for overseas movement. The men could barely believe it. D-Day had happened on June 6th. Allied forces were establishing themselves in France. The need for armored units was desperate. Finally, their chance to prove what they'd been insisting all along. They were ready. August 27, 1944. They boarded the troop ship Esperance Bay in New York Harbor. 712 men, personal equipment, weapons, everything except their tanks. Those would be issued in England. The crossing took 10 days. Cramped quarters, bunks stacked 4 high, meals in shifts, but spirits were sky high. They were finally going to war. Upon arrival in England, they received the latest Sherman variant, the M4A3 with the upgraded 76mm gun. Significant improvement over the 75 they'd trained with. Greater armor penetration. Better chance against German Panthers and Tigers. The longer barrel and improved ammunition meant American tankers could actually hurt the heavy German armor they'd face. The M4A3 also featured a more powerful engine. Ford GAA V8, 450 horsepower. Better acceleration, better hill climbing, more responsive in combat. In tank warfare, speed and firepower mean the difference between survival and death. They trained briefly on British soil. Compressed, intense, only weeks to master the new equipment before shipping to France. Then, the English Channel. Crossing, rough, landing craft pitching and rolling. Tank crews struggling with seasickness. October 10th, 1944, they came ashore at Omaha Beach, 4 months after D-Day. The beachhead was secure, but remnants of battle still littered the sand. Destroyed equipment, shattered fortifications, the ghostly atmosphere of ground paid for in blood. The 761st moved quickly inland, rail and road toward the front lines. October 28th, 1944, they reached their assembly area near the French-German border. General George Patton, commander of Third Army, had specifically requested them for his push toward the Siegfried Line. Patton was known for aggressive armored warfare, controversial personality, complicated views on race. He'd served with Buffalo Soldiers early in his career, respected their fighting ability. But he also harbored the prejudices common to his generation and class. When Patton addressed the 761st on October 28th, his speech was characteristically blunt. "Men, you're the first Negro tankers to ever fight in the American Army. I would never have asked for you if you weren't good. I have nothing but the best in my army." He paused. "Let that sink in. I don't care what color you are as long as you go up there and kill those Kraut sons of bitches." Another pause. His voice hardened. "Everyone has their eyes on you and is expecting great things from you. Most of all, your race is looking forward to your success." He leaned forward, made sure they heard every word. "Don't let them down, and damn you, don't let me down." The speech was vintage Patton. Profanity, motivation, acknowledgement of the racial dynamics at play. The men of the 761st understood the subtext perfectly. They weren't just soldiers going into combat. They were on trial. Their performance would be judged not just as soldiers, but as representatives of their entire race. The pressure was immense, but they'd trained for this moment for 30 months. November 7th, 1944, the Black Panthers entered combat. First objective, the German-held town of Morville-les-Vicq in northeastern France. Key road junction. Fortified. Previous American attacks had failed to dislodge the defenders. The 761st was attached to the 26th Infantry Division, ordered to break the stalemate. Captain John Long of B Company led the assault. No-nonsense officer from Detroit. Behind him, Sergeant Roy King commanded the lead Sherman. The attack began at dawn. As King's tank entered Morville-les-Vicq, a German soldier armed with a Panzerfaust anti-tank rocket launcher fired from a building. The shaped charge struck the Sherman's flank, disabled the tank, wounded 2 crew members, critical situation, lead tank immobilized, blocking the narrow street. German defenders converging. King and his crew dragged the wounded men to cover. Then, Using small arms and the tank's remaining operational weapons, they killed the Panzerfaust gunner and the crew of a nearby German anti-tank gun. The rest of B Company pushed into the town. Staff Sergeant Rivers encountered a German roadblock, felled tree reinforced with mines, German mortar and small arms fire pinning the accompanying infantry. The entire attack threatened to bog down. Rivers didn't hesitate. Dismounted from his tank under direct fire, attached a tow cable to the roadblock, climbed back into his Sherman. His tank dragged the obstacle clear. The column advanced. Infantry broke free from their exposed position. For this action, Rivers would later receive the Silver Star. By the end of the day, November 7th, the 761st had captured Morville-les-Vicq. The Germans defended stubbornly, but the Black Panthers prevailed. The cost was significant. Sergeant Roy King died of his wounds. Other casualties mounted, but they'd proven they could fight. More importantly, they'd proven they could win. German prisoners revealed something unexpected: confusion. Wehrmacht officers had been told that Black American soldiers were poorly trained, poorly led, would break under pressure. Instead, they encountered a well-coordinated armored infantry team that maneuvered with precision and fought with determination. One captured German officer compared Sergeant King's conduct to that of a Russian tank crew under similar circumstances, acknowledging the tactical competence displayed. The 761st pushed forward. November 8th. They fought at Vic-sur-Seille. November 9th. Château Salins after a 4-hour battle. November 10th. Dieuze captured. Each engagement reinforced the same pattern. The Black Panthers fought effectively, adapted to changing battlefield conditions, achieved their objectives. At Vic-sur-Seille, they encountered German defensive positions that had repelled previous attacks. Town on elevated ground, clear fields of fire, anti-tank guns covering approach roads, machine gun positions dominating key intersections. The 761st coordinated with infantry, used smoke to obscure German observation, suppressed defensive positions with tank fire while infantry advanced under cover, took the town with minimal casualties through superior tactics and coordination. At Château Salins, they faced more determined defense. German troops fortified stone buildings, created strong points dominating the town center. Tank main guns proved effective against these positions, reducing them methodically while infantry cleared surrounding structures. The 4-hour battle demonstrated the battalion's growing combat effectiveness. They were learning, adapting, improving with each engagement. The men themselves were surprised by how well they performed under fire. Years of training had prepared them technically, but combat revealed character. Fear was universal, but they functioned despite it. The sounds of battle, the smell of cordite, the sight of casualties, all the sensory overload of combat became manageable through training and leadership. Tank commanders made decisions calmly under fire. Crews executed orders despite danger. The battalion functioned as designed. Sergeant Warren Creasy became legendary for his courage. When his Sherman was knocked out by a German anti-tank gun, Creasy jumped out, commandeered a machine gun on a nearby half-track, used it to eliminate the enemy crew. Then, he climbed onto another tank and continued fighting. His actions earned him a battlefield commission to second. Lieutenant Creasy's combat record over the entire campaign was extraordinary. Fought at the front continuously, demonstrated tactical skill and personal courage that earned respect from everyone who witnessed it. Tank commanders who served with him recalled his calm under fire, his ability to make quick tactical decisions, his willingness to expose himself to danger to accomplish the mission. These qualities repeated across the battalion by dozens of men, defined the unit's character. The 761st wasn't just one or two exceptional individuals. It was an entire battalion of trained, motivated, capable soldiers who performed their duties under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Every tank crew functioned effectively. Every platoon executed orders professionally. The battalion as a whole achieved its objectives repeatedly against determined opposition. This collective excellence made the unit's achievement significant. It proved that blacks, soldiers in general, not just a few exceptional individuals, could perform as well as any troops in combat. But the most remarkable story of the 761st's early combat belonged to Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers. November 16th. Rivers was leading a company's advance toward Gebling when his Sherman struck a mine at a railroad crossing. The explosion tore through the tank's belly armor, sent shrapnel ripping through the crew compartment. Rivers took the worst of it. Metal fragments slashed his leg from knee to thigh, cutting down to the bone. The wound was catastrophic, required immediate evacuation. Captain David Williams, the company commander, reached Rivers' position with a medic. They carried morphine to dull the pain before evacuation. Williams recalled the conversation years later. "Reuben, you're going back. You've got $1 million wound. This is your ticket home." Rivers refused. He wouldn't accept morphine, said it would cloud his judgment. He wouldn't accept evacuation. His men needed him. The medics cleaned and dressed the wound. But Rivers could see German artillery observers marking the position. He climbed into another Sherman, took command. Through the night of November 16th, Rivers remained with A Company as they prepared to assault Guibling. By dawn on November 17th, his leg had swollen grotesquely. Infection setting in, the wound turning gangrenous. Every movement caused visible agony. Captain Williams again ordered evacuation. Rivers again refused. "Captain, you know better than that. This is going to be tough." Rivers led the assault into Guibling. His tank crew later reported that he directed their fire through gritted teeth, sweat pouring down his face from pain and fever. The Germans defended Gebling fiercely. The 761st lost 3 tanks to anti-tank fire and 1 to mines just taking the town. Rivers' Sherman engaged enemy positions throughout the day, knocking out machine gun nests, suppressing German infantry. Through November 17th and 18th, Rivers continued commanding his tank. His condition deteriorated rapidly. The infection was spreading. Medical officers who examined him in the field were horrified he was still fighting. By the morning of November 19th, Rivers was clearly dying, his leg black with gangrene, fever racking his body. But a company was ordered to advance toward Bourg-Altrou, and Rivers refused to be left behind. At dawn, a company pushed out from Gebling. Almost immediately, heavy anti-tank fire from concealed German positions. Captain Williams ordered his tanks to pull back to cover. Rivers radioed that he'd located the enemy anti-tank guns. He and another Sherman moved forward to engage, covering the company's withdrawal. The German guns concentrated fire on the 2 exposed American tanks. Armor-piercing rounds struck Rivers' Sherman repeatedly. 1 penetrated the turret. The tank exploded. Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers died instantly. 2 other crew members killed. The survivors wounded. Rivers had fought for 3 days with a wound that should have killed him on day 1. His leadership and sacrifice enabled a company to capture 2 heavily defended towns and inflict significant casualties on German forces. For his actions from November 16th to 19th, Rivers would eventually receive the Medal of Honor, though not until January 1997, 53 years after his death. The 761st Tank Battalion continued fighting. No time to process grief. The war demanded constant forward motion. December 16, 1944. Germany launched its last major offensive in the West. The Battle of the Bulge caught Allied forces by surprise, created a dangerous salient in American lines, threatened the port of Antwerp. The 761st was rushed north to help contain the German breakthrough, attached to the 87th Infantry Division, thrown into the fight for the Belgian town of Tillit. The movement north was chaotic, Allied forces scrambling to respond to the surprise German offensive, roads clogged with retreating units, refugees, supply columns. The 761st moved through this chaos, reached their assembly area January 6, 1945, went into action immediately. The battle for Tillit would prove one of the fiercest engagements the Black Panthers fought. German SS panzer troops defended the town with fanatical determination. Elite units, experienced soldiers who'd fought on the Eastern Front. They knew how to defend against armor. They'd prepared Tillit carefully, positioning anti-tank guns to cover approach routes, mining roads, fortifying buildings. They were determined to hold. Winter weather added another layer of misery. Temperatures dropping below freezing, snow accumulating to several feet, visibility often reduced to meters by blowing snow. The cold was brutal. Tank engines struggled to start. Mechanical systems froze. Ammunition had to be warmed before loading or it would jam. Crews wore every layer of clothing available, still suffered from the cold. The Sherman's narrow tracks struggled for traction on frozen ground. Tanks slipped and slid on ice. Drivers fought to maintain control on slopes. Movement that would have been simple in summer became treacherous in winter conditions. During the Tillit operation, the 761st encountered something new: psychological warfare directed specifically at them as black soldiers. German radio broadcasts, delivered by American-born propagandist Mildred Gillars, known as Axis Sally, jammed American communications channels. Good morning, Negro soldiers of the 761st. I am sorry that you will die today in Tillit. Her voice was smooth, almost sympathetic. Our fight is not with the Negroes in America, and your fight is not with us. Your fellow Negroes are rioting in Cleveland. A pause. Then the knife. Your commander, Captain Williams, is leading you to death and destruction. He is white, and not one of you. Your battalion commander, Major George, is also white, and not one of you. Another pause. Music swelling underneath. Louis Armstrong's horn. Leave your tanks now, and return home to Cleveland where you are needed. And you will not be killed. The broadcast was accompanied by, "I can't give you anything but love, baby." The psychological operation was sophisticated, designed to exploit racial tensions, convince black soldiers they were fighting a white man's war. It failed completely. The men of the 761st understood exactly what they were fighting for, not just against Nazi Germany, but against the very racial ideology that Axis Sally's broadcast represented. Tank Commander Frank Cochran's response, radioed to his company, became legendary. "They've hit me 3 times, but I'm still giving them hell." The 761st captured Tillit after days of brutal close quarters fighting. German defenders were shocked when they surrendered and discovered black soldiers had defeated them. Many Wehrmacht soldiers had internalized Nazi propaganda so completely that encountering skilled black tankers produced cognitive dissonance. How could an inferior race defeat superior German troops? German prisoners captured by the 761st often displayed visible confusion and fear. One prisoner at Tillit asked, "What are you doing here? This is a white man's war." The answer, obvious to everyone except true believers in racial theory, was simple. Nazi racial ideology was wrong. Nazi propaganda about black soldiers being inferior was extensively documented and widespread. The regime had conducted propaganda campaigns depicting black people as subhuman since the 1920s, long before the war began. These campaigns served multiple purposes: reinforced Nazi racial theories at home, prepared German soldiers to view their enemies as inferior, attempted to divide Allied forces by exploiting racial tensions. The regime had spent years building these beliefs. Hitler's Mein Kampf, written in 1925 and 1926, contained explicit references to contamination of the white race through contact with black people, argued that racial mixing would lead to the decline of civilization. These weren't fringe beliefs. They were central Nazi doctrine, taught in schools, preached in propaganda, enforced through law. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935, primarily known for targeting Jews, also applied to black people in Germany. People of African descent classified as racially alien faced legal discrimination, social ostracism, eventually violent persecution. Approximately 500 Afro-Germans were forcibly sterilized under Nazi-titled racial hygiene programs between 1937 and 1940. The goal: prevent what Nazis called racial contamination. During the war, the German military distributed propaganda leaflets to black American soldiers, attempting to convince them they were fighting for a nation that oppressed them. These leaflets depicted scenes of lynching and discrimination in America, asked black soldiers why they were fighting for a country that treated them as second-class citizens. The psychological operation was sophisticated, but ultimately ineffective, because it underestimated black soldiers' understanding of what they were fighting against. Nazi cartoons depicted black soldiers as primitives, incapable of modern warfare. German propaganda magazines published illustrations showing black American troops as savage, subhuman figures who threatened civilization. Wehrmacht soldiers were exposed to this propaganda throughout their training and service. Many internalized it completely. The Black Horror on the Rhine propaganda campaign had portrayed African soldiers in the French army during World War I as savages who committed atrocities against German civilians, though these accusations were largely fabricated. They were widely believed in Germany, formed part of the narrative German soldiers carried into World War II. Wehrmacht training materials reinforced these beliefs, preparing German soldiers to face what they were told would be inferior opponents. German military intelligence assessments of American forces consistently underestimated black units, predicted they would break under pressure, fight poorly. These assessments reflected ideological bias rather than objective analysis. When reality contradicted these predictions, many German soldiers experienced cognitive dissonance that began to crack their faith in Nazi ideology. The reality proved devastatingly different. The 761st continued operations through the winter of 1944 into 1945, fought in the Rhineland campaign, breaching the Siegfried Line in March 1945. This accomplishment was particularly significant. The Siegfried Line, known to Germans as the West Wall, was a series of fortifications along Germany's western border, stretched for nearly 400 miles from the Netherlands to Switzerland. The line consisted of more than 18,000 bunkers, tunnels, and tank traps, concrete fortifications housing anti-tank guns and machine guns with interlocking fields of fire. Dragon's teeth, pyramid-shaped concrete obstacles, blocked tank movement. Minefields covered approaches. The Germans had spent years building these defenses, considered them virtually impenetrable. Breaking through required coordinated infantry tank assaults against prepared positions, defended by experienced German troops now fighting for their homeland. The 761st participated in multiple assaults on Siegfried Line positions. Each attack required meticulous planning. Engineers cleared mines and demolished obstacles under covering fire from tanks. Infantry advanced in close coordination with armor, each supporting the other. Artillery suppressed German defensive positions, while tanks and infantry maneuvered into assault positions. These were set-piece battles. Deliberate attacks against prepared defenses required patience, coordination, courage. During the period from March 20th to 23rd, 1945, the 761st achieved one of its most impressive tactical victories. In this four-day operation, they broke through fortified Siegfried Line positions near Rheindurkheim. They inflicted approximately 4,000 enemy casualties, killed and wounded, captured 3,210 German prisoners. German units defending this sector included elements of Luftwaffe field divisions, Volkssturm-Militia, and regular Wehrmacht infantry. The breakthrough allowed Allied forces to advance deeper into Germany, collapsing German defensive lines, hastening the end of the war. This single operation demonstrated the full evolution of the battalion's combat effectiveness. Our inexperienced unit that entered combat in November had become a veteran formation capable of executing complex combined arms, operations against determined opposition. Their success proved that skill, training, and leadership mattered more than race. German prisoners taken by the 761st were treated according to the Geneva Convention, with professionalism and humanity. This behavior, so at odds with what German soldiers had been told to expect from black soldiers, created another crack in Nazi ideology. If the Nazis had lied about black soldiers being murderous primitives, what else had they lied about? Some German prisoners later testified that capture by black American troops was the moment they began questioning everything the Third Reich had taught them. At the end of March 1945, the 761st crossed the Rhine River, pushed deep into Germany. The Rhine crossing was a major Allied operation. The river had served as Germany's last major natural defensive barrier in the West. Once across, Allied forces could advance into the industrial heart of Germany. The 761st crossed as part of a massive movement of men and equipment. Engineers had constructed pontoon bridges. Traffic control units managed the flow of vehicles. The crossing was orderly, professional, a demonstration of Allied logistical superiority. Over the following weeks, they participated in the encirclement of German forces in the Ruhr pocket. This massive operation trapped hundreds of thousands of Wehrmacht and SS troops, effectively ending German capacity to defend Western Germany. The Ruhr was Germany's industrial heartland. Losing it meant losing the capacity to produce weapons, ammunition, supplies. German forces attempted to break out of the encirclement. They failed. Allied forces tightened the noose methodically. The 761st's role? Maintain pressure on retreating German forces, prevent them from establishing new defensive lines. They conducted pursuit operations, moving rapidly to keep enemy units off balance. Engaged in meeting engagements with German forces attempting to withdraw. Captured towns whose defenders hadn't yet received orders to retreat. The pace was exhausting, but exhilarating. After months of slow, grinding combat against prepared defenses, they were now pursuing a broken enemy. They captured dozens of towns whose names blur together in after-action reports. Small German villages, farming communities, industrial suburbs, each had to be cleared. Each might contain defenders. Tank crews remained alert despite fatigue, scanning for threats. Ready to engage, infantry followed close behind. Clearing buildings, taking prisoners. The routine became familiar. Approach town. Suppress any resistance with tank fire. Infantry moves in. Clear structures. Move to next objective. They destroyed hundreds of German vehicles. Trucks abandoned by retreating units. Staff cars whose officers fled on foot. Half-tracks out of fuel. Artillery pieces left behind. Some destroyed by tank fire. Others simply disabled to prevent future use. The roads of Germany in April 1945 were littered with abandoned equipment, evidence of a collapsing army. Throughout the campaign, they maintained operational effectiveness despite equipment wear and continuous combat stress. Tank maintenance was crucial. Tracks wore out. Engines needed service. Weapons required cleaning. Ammunition had to be loaded. Fuel had to be found.